So here's this thing that's been happening quietly over the last year. Developers are getting PIP'd, reassigned, or straight up let go. And the common thread is that they shipped AI generated code they didn't fully understand. This video is not me saying AI is bad, go back to writing everything by hand. That's not the take. The take is there's a specific way people are using AI that's genuinely putting careers at risk, and it has a name now, vibe coding. So let's get into what that actually means, what's going wrong, and what the engineers who are thriving with AI are doing differently. The term was actually coined by Andre Karpathy, and the idea is basically you describe what you want, the AI writes it, you eyeball it, ship it. You're not really reading the code, you're not reasoning through it, you're just vibing with the output. And look, for side projects, for throwaway scripts, for prototyping, that's completely fine. The problem is when that same mindset makes it into production code bases at companies. That's where things start falling apart. Here's the core issue. And this is the thing that doesn't get said enough. AI generated code is optimized to look correct. It compiles, it passes your happy path test. It does the thing you asked. But the production code has a completely different bar. It needs to handle edge cases, it needs to be secure against inputs you didn't think of. It needs to be readable enough that the next engineer can maintain it. And that gap between looks right and is production ready is where the incidents are happening. Let me walk you through the patterns that keep showing up. Number one is security. AI models have a known tendency to generate SQL queries that are vulnerable to injection, to skip input sanitization, to write auth flows that work but have subtle logic flaws. The model isn't being careless, it's just pattern matching to code it's seen, and a lot of the code on the internet is not production grade. Second pattern is auth and access control. There are actual post-mortems from startups where AI generated middlewares were shipping without proper role checks because the developer accepted the output without even reading it. And third is data exposure, logging statements, debug endpoints, API responses that return more fields than they should. The AI doesn't know what was sensitive, you did, but you weren't reading the code. Now, I'm not going to name companies here, but if you spend 30 minutes on engineering forums like Hacker News, Reddit, even internal Slack channels that get screenshot shared, you will find the same story repeating. Junior engineer, tight deadlines, used AI to generate an auth service, passed code reviews because the reviewer was also moving fast, made it to production. 3 weeks later, a security researcher or a customer finds a hole. And then the question becomes who owns this code and who reviewed it. That's when performance conversations start. Not because the engineer used AI, nobody cares about that, but because they shipped code they couldn't explain or defend. Now, the obvious pushback is I use AI constantly and my career is fine. And that's probably true, but there is something called the survivorship problem here. Engineers who got in trouble aren't posting about it. The incidents that were quietly rolled back, the engineers who got reassigned after a production fire, that doesn't make it to your Twitter feed. What you see is a highlight reel, people shipping fast, companies moving fast, AI productivity stories. What you don't see is the fallout, and the fallout is real. So, what does it look like when engineers use AI well? And I've talked to a bunch of people about this. The pattern is pretty consistent. AI is a first draft tool, not a sign off tool. They use it to go from 0 to 60% faster, and then they read every line before it ships. They treat AI generated tests the same way they treat AI generated code, a starting point and not the ground truth. For anything touching auth, payments, or data, either they write it by hand or they read it with the same scrutiny they would apply to code from a contractor they had never worked with before. And here's the key thing, if they can't explain what a block of code does, it doesn't ship. And this is the part that I think a lot of developers haven't fully internalized it. When you ship code, it doesn't matter who wrote it. You own it. AI doesn't get PIP'd. AI doesn't get called into the postmortem. You do. And that accountability hasn't changed at all. What's changed is that AI makes it much easier to ship code you don't understand. And that's the actual risk. It's not AI being bad, it's the false sense of confidence that comes from code that looks correct but hasn't been reasoned through. And this is the starting to get more formal at the company level too. Some organizations are starting to require the AI assisted PRs get flagged, so reviewers know to look harder. Some are updating their security policies to say that anything touching auth or payments need human written logic or a dedicated security review. This isn't any anti-AI propaganda or something. It's just engineering maturity catching up to how fast adaptation happened. And the engineers who are ahead of this are the ones who have already developed their own version of that standard. They don't wait for the company to tell them. They already know what they'll ship and what they don't. So here's what I think the actual takeaway is. And I want to be clear that this is not a doom and gloom message. AI is a genuinely powerful tool. It's raised the floor for what an individual engineer can ship, but it hasn't changed what separates good engineers from great ones, and that's judgment. The ability to look at a system and say, this will fail under a load, this is a security hole, and this is going to be a maintenance nightmare in 6 months. AI doesn't have any of that. You do, or you should. And that judgment only develops if you're actually reading and reasoning through code and not just accepting it. So practically, what does this look like? I would say build your own standard and stick to it. Use AI aggressively for the parts of the job that are repetitive or mechanical. Boilerplate, test scaffolding, first drafts of documentation, something like that. But draw your own line at security sensitive code, at anything customer facing, at anything you would be embarrassed to explain in an incident review. The simplest heuristic I've seen is this. If you can't write the PR comment explaining why this code is correct, not just what it does, don't merge it. That's it. That's the bar. The engineers who are going to thrive over the next few years aren't the ones who use AI the most, they're the ones who use it the smartest. And that means staying in the driver's seat. Using AI as a force multiplier and not replacement for thinking. If you're building with AI tools and you want to actually understand what's happening under the hood, the architecture, the trade offs, and the failure modes, that's what this channel is for. Subscribe if that's the kind of engineer you're trying to be, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.